Guess who's back? Yes, NorthStar Bets' very own Steven Psihogios joins me. Stevie, it's been a minute since we last spoke. The Toronto Maple Leafs did get eliminated by your Boston Bruins. The Canucks did advance to the second round, and they did make a miraculous comeback in Game 1. So we'll touch on all of those things, but let's start off in Leafland, where yesterday it was announced that Sheldon Keefe was fired after the team lost once again in the first round. Steve, I haven't talked to you in a minute, but what were your thoughts on the ending of that series and the Leafs firing Sheldon Keefe, and what is next in Leafland?
Well, I think when you look at the team, you've got all these high-priced players,
Mhm.
and they only score one goal in an elimination game. I think, yeah, you should blame the coach. I would say that sarcastically. It's not his fault that his team couldn't score a goal. If you want to put some of the power play shortcomings on him, sure, but they've been coming up short in the playoffs on the power play for years. This precedes Sheldon Keefe. That this is not an issue exclusive to Keefe. It's an issue exclusive to the players. It's something that's followed them from the beginning, not just Keefe. So to me, you get rid of Keefe, okay, that's the bare minimum if you're the Maple Leafs as far as change goes. You don't have a guy who can run a power play or quarterback a unit. I'm sorry, Morgan Riley proved to me he's not that guy offensively or defensively in the first round. So you're kind of stuck with a guy who's just kind of okay at everything at a high price bill. And unfortunately, it's hard to build out a defense when he's your number one guy because you can't really afford to pay another guy top of the market value when you're paying Riley as much as you are. So to me, everyone wants to talk about Marner. He's become the easy target, in my opinion. But if you really want to make some change, start with defense and look at Morgan Riley. I think he's the bigger problem, if you
Mhm.
ask me, the underreported issue on the Maple Leafs.
I 1000% agree with you on that about Morgan Riley. Look, I think Morgan Riley is a good defenseman. I don't think he's an elite NHL defenseman. I don't think on a Stanley Cup winning team he's a number one defenseman, and he's making $7.5 million bucks. I think he gets a whole lot of he slides right by because it's the core four. That's the sexy name and that's the sexy group. But Morgan Riley, let's face it, he slides by because he gives a good quote in the media. He's a bit more honest than other guys. I think he's not a part of the core four, but he deserves a whole lot of culpability as well because if you're making $7.5 million and you just sign a brand new contract, you need to perform, right? And he hasn't performed. And I think, look, Mitch Marner, the whole God's comment got kind of blown out of proportion. But again, he just doesn't know how to read the room. And I think that's going to be a difficult conversation. Having a conversation with Morgan Riley might be difficult. I think it's time to strip John Tavares of the C. I think it's even time to even ask him, hey, look, it's time for you to move on, right? Do you see sweeping wholesale changes on the roster of the Toronto Maple Leafs, or are they going to do the inevitable and run it back once again?
For starters, John Tavares, you really can't move him. Like, you absolutely can't move him
Can move him,
because,
but you'd have to add a massive, massive amount of sweetener to that deal for somebody to
yeah. Yeah, and the last time they did that was Patrick Marleau, and that first round pick they gave up for Marleau ended up being Seth Jarvis. So
exactly.
not really a good move if you're the Maple Leafs. So that's why I say they can't really afford to get rid of Tavares. They don't have second, third round picks to give up. It's going to have to be a first rounder. And do you really want to make that mistake again? So I think you kind of have to just eat that money with John Tavares. Again, with Marner, the time to move him was last year. It's
Mhm.
very obvious. Now the no move clause has kicked in. What are you realistically going to get from Marner? Every team you talk to knows they've been approved by Marner for trade, which means, there's not a long list of suitors waiting to trade for Marner because he controls the market. And at the same token, they know how tumultuous the relationship has gotten between Marner and the fan base here in Toronto.
Mhm.
Why would any team in their right mind pay top dollar to bring in a guy for 1 year, potentially just being 1 year, especially in a situation where you know that you have all the leverage? Like, that trade is not going to yield as much as Leafs fans might think or hope it will. So they've kind of missed the boat on selling Marner. The Tavares contract has not aged well at all. So I honestly think they're kind of stuck. And I think maybe out of a lack of better options, they might be forced to run it back. And I know Leafs Nation won't like to hear that, but they've put themselves in this position where it's kind of too late to get out of it right now.
Look, so I think injuries happen. Joseph Wall came out that he had a sprained back. Austin Matthews became really sick after game 2, and then that persisted to game 4 where he was having head issues. William Nylander had migraines. Connor Duer's going to have shoulder surgery. Bobby McMahon had an MCL sprain. So they were beat up, but every team is beaten up at this point in time. I watched Leon Draisaitl in the second half of game 1 against Vancouver to get hurt, and it changed. But he was still out there. I expect he's going to play. He's a guy before that led the playoffs in scoring on a broken ankle, pretty much, on one leg. So to me, it comes to the point, and we're getting into the Sheldon Keefe thing right now, is look, Sheldon Keefe shouldered all the blame. I was listening to the press conference right now with Keith Pelly, Brendan Shannon, Brad Treliving. All of them took their turn at sharing the blame. But you know who didn't share the blame or take any of responsibility? The players. The players all said, oh, we believe in the core four. We believe in this. It stings. It hurts. Nobody bared any responsibility. Who on this roster is ever going to stand up and just say, look, this is not good enough. We have failed on massive levels. You look at the Boston Bruins yesterday. They got dumped on in game 2. But David Pastrnak tells his coach, I want to go out there and I want to fight Matthew Tkachuk. Now, again, it's getting a lot of play, but just the mentality just to be like, coach, I know I make $11 million a year, but I'm going to go out there and I'm going to fight the guy. And what did he say in his press conference? I think it was yesterday.
I can take a punch. I'm not afraid to take a punch.
And I'm not scared of him, right? Who on the Toronto Maple Leafs is doing that? None of them.
No, they don't have the killer mentality of the Leafs, and they don't have the leadership from a player level, to be honest. That's, to me, the bigger issue. It doesn't matter who you bring in behind the bench. You have no leaders on the ice. Really, the closest thing we saw to leadership was Nylander going after Marner when he was throwing, his temper tantrum on the bench. Like, that was the closest thing we saw to leadership in that series. So, to me, you have none of it amongst the players. John Tavares, like, let's be real. I don't know what he's doing in that locker room, but it's not working. It's clearly not working. And he's not giving you anything on the ice either. This is a team, the Leafs, man, I'm a Bruins fan, but Leafs fans deserve better. They really do, because this team is so unlikable. It's a cast of overpaid players, and none of them want to step up and answer the hard questions. Look, after game 7, look, Morgan Rielly wears an A, not answering questions. Mitch Marner wears an A, not answering questions. You might think, oh, that's not a big deal. But it is, because now someone else has got to go answer those questions for them, because they don't want to do it. I'm sorry, if that's your leadership to me, and then you got Robo Tavares, just replay the hits, whatever's on the cue card from last year, just bring them back out. It honestly, it's ridiculous. You have no player leadership. Nobody wants to step up and be accountable. Nobody wants to pay the price to win in the playoffs. Show me. It's been 8 years. They've had 8 years to prove that they want to win in the playoffs, and they haven't done it once. So you tell me, is it the coach or is it the players? Because eventually it gets to a point where no matter what the coach tells you, the players got to go and execute. And I have not seen that from these players. I'm sorry. They need a real leader in that locker room.
Well, even just like the depth guys, like I look at a guy like in the Canucks series against Nashville, they kind of blow it in game 5 at home. And Ian Cole, the 6th defenseman on the team, comes out and says, when you're in the playoffs, you play to every series like it's going to go 7 games. Right? Because remember the conversation after the Canucks won game 4 in Nashville was, oh, we don't want to come back here. We're done. Ian Cole said it's a prima donna attitude. This is your 6th defenseman calling out the rest of the team. The accountability factor. And I think that's what Sheldon Keefe's doing was, or he was the fall guy for this because of the accountability factor. This organization has given the players no accountability. Everybody else outside the core 4 and in the front office bears the responsibility of the failures, not the players, because the players have been given everything they wanted. That's why when I look at it again, like Rick Tocchet, he holds his players accountable, but he doesn't rip them in the media, though. And I think when you look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, for a new coach, accountability is going to be the biggest thing. If I'm interviewing him, How are you going to hold our players accountable? How are you going to uphold them to a certain standard? So is there a coach out there that you think can do that and can maximize the best out of some of these players that will still be there?
It's not a matter of if there's a coach out there that can do that. It's a matter of will the Leafs let him?
Yeah.
Because Shanahan has shown when Keefe made remarks about this group and these players, he had to walk them back. You know how bad that looks on the coach in front of everybody? That tells you everything you need to know. The coach doesn't control the locker room. He doesn't. That's the thing. Will management allow the coach, whoever it is, the next guy behind the bench, to have full autonomy over the locker room? Because if he doesn't, it's going to be the same old song. If the players can overrule the coach, it doesn't matter who you bring in. It really doesn't. So that's the frustrating part with the Maple Leafs, is that, sure, you want to say Keefe didn't do it? Well, there's a couple examples of him doing it and having to walk it back. So I don't think it's a Keefe issue. I don't think it's anybody else but the players and management. To be honest, Brendan Shanahan, I'm sorry, this Shanahan plan, 10 years ago, they were losing to the Bruins in the first round. And you know what they're doing now today? They're losing to the Bruins in the first round. It hasn't changed. Nothing. He's shown up. It's like the before and after memes online. The losing weight. The guy that just got a tan. He didn't lose any weight. He didn't lose any weight. The team didn't get any better. The players are different. It looks different, but they didn't get any better. It's a big problem. It's a major problem. And it starts with Shanahan. Until he goes and until they get some new life and some new culture. We talked about that a lot before the Leafs, was they needed a culture change. Well, guess what? They got a culture change. And it's just the same old. Nobody takes accountability and they just love to lose. That's the culture of the Leafs. That is their culture right now.
Well, let me ask you this. Who's the clubhouse leader for you to be the next Leaf head coach?
Well, you hear a lot of people talking about Berube, but let's be real. Like, if Berube tries to coach the way he coached in St. Louis, there might be some guys walking out of that locker room pretty quickly. Like, right now, he makes a lot of sense. The fan base would like him because he's kind of this rough and tumble. You know, he did beat Boston in the first round. He had a hot goaltender, mind you. Jordan Binnington was playing out of his mind. I don't know how much you can coach. I don't know how much you can coach a guy just who wouldn't let a puck in. But he's kind of the sexy name. But look, like Berube, a big part of what he did in St. Louis was when he took over, he brought in his own staff. He had Steve Ott behind the bench. He has his own crew. The Leafs didn't fire any other coaches. It was just Keefe. So if you bring in a guy like Berube, I'm sure he's going to say, hey, I want to name coaches. And Shanahan doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's willing to, loosen up his grip on the organization. So to me, sure, you want to bring a Berube because you think he'll make some change. It's not up to him. Will management let him? Will the players listen? That's all that matters.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a hard-nosed guy like Dean Evison or Craig Berube, maybe even a Todd McClellan. I think it's going to be Jay Woodcroft. I think it's going to be a guy, Jay Woodcroft, where he's dealt with superstar players before, of course, with McDavid and Draisaitl. Took him to the conference finals. You know, they almost beat Vegas, so he has some success. But he's not a guy that's going to be a lightning rod per se, right? I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to ruffle any feathers. And quite frankly, I think as long as Brendan Shanahan's here, it's his mold however he wants it, right? However, Brad Trevin can say whatever he wants, but at the end of the day, I think the buck stops with Brendan Shanahan, and he's not fired. He's still here, so don't be surprised if it's Jay Woodcroft. I really think it's going to be Jay Woodcroft.
You know what? That wouldn't shock me. That really wouldn't shock me because I said it. Shanahan, it doesn't seem like the kind of guy who wants to give up much control of this team. And when you bring in those hard-nosed coaches, you kind of got to let them have at it. Otherwise, what's the point of bringing them in? Like, it doesn't make any sense if you bring in a guy like Berube who wants to run a tight ship, but you don't let him. Like, at that point, it doesn't. Woodcroft, like you said, he was the player's coach. He kind of let them do what he want. But Keefe, everyone said the same thing about Keefe. When they went from Babcock to Keefe, it was, finally we got a player's coach. He's going to, he's going to play Austin Matthews in the playoffs. He's going to play our stars in the playoffs. Oh, finally. And it didn't work. So to me, like, again, you went from one end to the other already, and it didn't work. You can try bringing in someone in between. But again, I don't know what Brendan Shanahan is doing. in these job evaluations. I don't know how he's swinging it and how he's lasted this long, but I would love to know. I as someone, who would love to, just underperform constantly and keep their job. I'd love to know what he's saying.
You and everybody in Leafland would love to know that. Let's switch over to two Canadian teams that are actually still playing. The Vancouver Canucks and Edmonton Oilers. Canucks, of course, were down 4-1 in Game 1, come all the way back to win 5-4. What were your takeaways from that game? And should Edmonton still be the prohibitive favorite that they are in this series?
I still would give the Oilers status as favorites. I know that you're not going to like to hear that. And look,
I like the underdog role. I love the underdog role.
Yeah, hey, they've been thriving in it. Basically, since jump, the Canucks have been underdogs this year. No one really thought their success was sustainable. It kind of waned a little bit down the stretch. But one thing that surprised me was the fact that Vancouver was able to make Game 1 look a lot of what their first-round series against Nashville looked like, which was very low-event hockey. I thought Edmonton was going to come in and make it their game and their series. And we talked about that a lot in the first round. It's the teams that can turn their series, like what Colorado did with Winnipeg. They made it a run and gun series, and it was game over for the Jets. They can't play that style. Vancouver made it, despite the 5-4 score. Vancouver made it a low-event game. The game did not match really what the final score says. Edmonton's held to 18 shots. It's their third lowest total of any game all season. Vancouver doing that consistently. Let's see if they can do that. We're going to see. It's a game of adjustments. If Edmonton adjusts, that's why I still give the Oilers status, because if they make the adjustments, I just don't think Vancouver can match those top end guys if they can find ways to free them up and generate more looks. Because that was the biggest issue for Edmonton was, they had 4 goals, but they didn't really generate a whole lot. If they find ways to generate a lot, you could see Edmonton scoring some high totals in this series and really taking it to Vancouver. But all that being said, if this continues to look like the Nashville series, edge goes to Vancouver, and kudos to them for making it like that in Game 1.
Well, you talked a lot about how Vancouver dirtied it up and played defensive. The Canucks since basically the All-Star break have really played defensive-minded hockey. And Rick Tocchet this whole second half of the season, even when they were scoring all the goals in the beginning of the season, was putting up a 10 spot against San Jose, putting up 8 goals or 7 goals against Edmonton in the beginning of the season. He was consistently preaching defense, 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 structure, defense, defense, defense. And we're seeing it now. The way this team can play defensive hockey, but still take the puck up, go up in the rush, and still create chances has been very impressive. They held Connor McDavid was pretty much a non-factor in Game 1, which is hard to do. Now, do I think that's going to continue? I don't think so. I think it's going to be hard to keep a guy like that. But if you can hold Hyman in check and Draisaitl in check and all the rest of the guys in check, you have a very good chance of winning. And the biggest thing is this. Stuart Skinner is becoming Stuart Skinner once again. Holy, what a stinky goalie he is. Like, Arthur Shelovs did not play very good, but he didn't play as bad as Stuart Skinner. He made the saves when he had to make them. And quite frankly, look, the pressure is mounting. Nobody in the NHL has more pressure on their shoulders than Stuart Skinner. If Stuart Skinner cannot play competently and provide the Oilers with competent goaltending, they are not going to win this series. They will not win this series. They will lose, and the Canucks will go to the conference finals. Because why? He can't make the saves when they need it the most.
No, and that was evident in Game 1. He was solid down the stretch in that LA series, but Game 1 was not his best work. I think he'll bounce back. I have confidence, but I know what you're saying. Hey, the track record isn't the cleanest for Stuart Skinner. So, and I can't argue with that. So if he continues to play like he did in Game 1, Vancouver, if they keep it to that low event style, they just got to take advantage of their opportunities. I still think Edmonton makes adjustments. And one thing I think Edmonton will try to do better is try to draw some more penalties. And what I mean by that, how can you get better at drawing penalties? Just keep it on McDavid's stick a little bit longer. Let him skate around because, it's hard to keep up with a guy like that. But kudos to Vancouver. They know, they saw the blueprint. LA tried. They lost a couple games where they only took like 1 or 2 penalties in that first round. And Vancouver, 1 penalty. Of course, it's right off the bat. It kills them. Edmonton scores a power play goal, but the rest of the game was clean. So look, the two biggest things for Vancouver is, put pucks on net from anywhere really, and just stay out of the box. You want to put the pressure on Edmonton to win ways that it just doesn't usually win games.
Well, let's before we wrap it up, I said Canucks in 7 before the series. Let's get your series prediction for that, and give me your best bets for tonight.
I'm going to go Oilers in 6. I know you don't like hearing that. I'm sorry, Justin. I'm sorry. I'm going to go Oilers in 6. I've been riding the Oilers for the Cup train for a little while. I got futures on them, Dallas, the Rangers. So I'm going to stick with those 3 teams. I like all 3 of them to advance. And then also for tonight, if I like Edmonton in 6, I kind of have to come back to them tonight, right? They're minus 127 over at NorthStar Bets. That's my best bet for tonight's game. I'm going to say under 3 goals for Vancouver in that game at minus 117. I think you see a little bit more commitment to maybe not necessarily that they, gave up a lot of shots. Vancouver finished with 24, which is a good, not great total. But I think limiting those high danger chances, which is where Vancouver really took into Edmonton in that first game, was their quality was much better than Edmonton's. I expect a much tighter defensive effort from the Oilers tonight.
Well, sounds good, Stevie. I hope you're wrong, and we'll talk again on Monday. Take care, brother.
Sounds good, Justin. Talk on Monday.